Hello and good evening, everybody, and it's really great to be back. And tonight I want to present to you a very, very special episode of Album Rant in the sense that I am going to talk about a new wave of British heavy metal group called Raven for the very first time. And as you can probably tell from what you see right in front of you, we're going to be looking at their debut effort released in 1981 entitled Rock Until You Drop. But anyways, I have a pretty interesting history with this band in the sense that I knew about them for a very, very long time, actually. I think the very first time I'd actually heard about them was when I was in college, actually, when I was like 21, 22 maybe, and I think I was watching VH1, and they were doing some kind of top 500 heavy metal artist countdown, and Raven was among them, and I was like, man, these guys rock. I'd better go buy a greatest hits album by them and listen to them. Well, week turned into week, month turned into month, year turned into year, decade turned into decade, and it wasn't until a few years ago when I was 34 actually no, I was 36, I want to say. Yeah, I was 36 in the year 2021, and actually I will never forget the day that I first bought this greatest hits album, and that's an entirely different story in itself. But finally, about 15 years later, I finally picked up a greatest hits by these guys, and I was like, man, these guys are awesome. These guys rock. But yes, they are a British thrash metal group, and they were definitely highly influential on what is considered to be the big four of thrash metal. And of course, that would be Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, and Slayer. And I'm not too big of a Slayer fan, but that's a different topic. But anyways, they formed actually very, very far back in the year 1974 by two brothers by the name of John and Mark Gallagher. And John would later become the bassist and lead vocalist, and Mark would become the lead guitarist. And they started out very, very underground, very, very low-key, and they mostly played gigs where they were opening up for a lot of punk metal bands, or just punk bands, actually. And they really started making it big They really started making it big in the early 80s where they headlined. They opened up for Metallica in the year 1983, just after Metallica had first formed. But by that point, they had 3 albums out. And this right here is the first one, which is entitled Rock Until You Drop. Now, they finally got a record deal in the year 1980 after a lot of hardships and a lot of setbacks, but you know, better late than never, and they signed on with Neat Records. Yes, that is the name of their record company, Neat Records. They were pretty low budget to say the least, I'll tell you that. But, yes, they released their very first single in the year 1980 as well, entitled Don't Need Your Money, which did end up on this album, and I'm going to talk about it in a second. But, of course, after they released that first single, they got even more gigs, and I already talked about how they toured with Metallica, but they also toured with Ozzy, Motorhead, Whitesnake, and Iron Maiden, and man, that's quite an impressive resume, I'll tell you that, especially for a group that is relatively not very well known with the mainstream. But let's see what we have on the back cover. As you can see right here, we have the lineup. We have Mark Gallagher on lead guitar. We have Rob Hunter on the drums. And we have John Gallagher on lead vocals and the bass guitar and occasional lead guitar. Down here, we have a couple of credits right there. Yep, turn it up. And you can see right there, we have the address for Neat Records, which I highly doubt even exists anymore. I mean, I really don't know, but they're kind of the Orion Pictures of the metal community, so take it for what you will. Now, where is the track list? Well, man, we don't really have a whole lot of space here for the song list now, do we? I mean, this is going to be kind of awkward because as you can see right here, we have quite a lot of space for the band name, Raven, Rock Until You Drop. We have some rather large pictures of the band, which I'm fine with, and then we have a lot of space for the credits, but I'm really going to have to kind of zoom in and kind of squeeze in here to finally give you an idea of what the songs are, but at least it's on there, and at least it's in order at least. But it starts off with the very first track entitled Hard Ride, and this thing starts out very, very thunderous and very, very ferocious and raw. Something about this sound, ladies and gentlemen, is it is not very overly produced at all. It is very underproduced. And of course, it is not a good thing when the record company comes in, the producer comes in, and they start polishing up the guitars a lot. They start adding in a whole bunch of different sounds to it, and it really takes away from what the band may have originally intended. But there's also such a thing as being underproduced. And I touched on this in one of my previous episodes when I was talking about Megadeth, and I said their very first album, Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good, I felt it was underproduced and it really didn't give the album much of a feel to it. I feel that these guys on Rock Until You Drop, I feel that they have struck a happy medium between being underproduced and overproduced. They still retain that very raw, aggressive energy without going too far, and I actually really, really like that. But, yeah, it's a pretty fast song. It's a very, very good opener, and, you know, the chorus is pretty simplistic for what it is. It just goes, giving me a hard time, making me lose my mind, you're giving me a rough ride, you're driving me wild, yeah! And that's something about John Gallagher. He definitely has this falsetto going, and I definitely really respect it. I think it accompanies the music very, very well, and a lot of metal vocalists do this, and I think he pulls it off very, very nicely. Then we have the Hell Patrol. No, not that Hell Patrol by Judas Priest. This is Hell Patrol by Raven. And yes, before you say anything, this came out before the Judas Priest song. Now that we have that underway, let's go ahead and talk about the song as it is. It's, diving into the whole raw feeling of this album, it starts out with what sounds like the band tuning their instruments, which I definitely respect. It's got that very garage feeling to it, and it, again, it goes along with the very low budget that this record had to deal with. But it's a little bit slower, but it's still pretty ferocious and everything, and the feel to it, this is gonna sound kind of weird, but I think the feel really feels a lot like a Megadeth song, but it's actually a cover. The rhythm feels a lot like These Boots Were Made for Walking, but the cover version by Megadeth. I know that sounds kind of odd, but first time I heard that song, that's immediately what I thought of, so we have that at least. But like I said, it's a little bit slower than Hard Ride, but still, John Gallagher is on point, and he's got that very, very thunderous falsetto going, and I definitely really respect that. Definitely has a very punk feel to it, and I really feel these guys were influenced a lot by the whole punk rock movement, and it transitioned very, very well into what they produce. But again, things kind of speed up a little bit before the chorus, and of course, it all ends, it all crescendos with him going, "You won't get me on the Hell Patrol!" And then the last time he does that, of course, he turns it up to 11, and he's got that falsetto, "Yow!" Ooh, I love it. Now we come to the third song, which is Don't Need Your Money, which was actually the very first single that they ever released. And it ended up on this album, like I said earlier. But yeah, I mean, it's still very fast. One thing I really like about this one, the rhythm is a lot more groovy and swinging than the previous two songs. I thought the previous two songs were a little bit flat in their rhythm, at least. I don't really feel that with Don't Need Your Money, and I think it's a much stronger song for what it is. But again, still definitely has those punk influences in it. But yeah, again, much like Hell Patrol, right before the chorus, things start building up and building up and building up, and you know you're going to get a very explosive payoff in the chorus, and it does kind of work for like I said. It's basically like, get off my back, get off my track, and I'll tell you if you want facts. I don't want no rich fat daddy trying to change my life. I just want to relax. And I know I kind of messed that up, but you kind of get the gist of it. It's a pretty good chorus, and I definitely give the song my endorsement for that. Then we come to Over the Top, and this one is a little bit more disposable than what came before it. The intro, it's got a very interesting guitar intro. It sounds, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but the intro, I'll just compare it to something else that I've talked about before. It sounds a lot like A Corpse Without Soul by Merciful Fate, which I have talked about in a previous episode. And it works and everything, but the song itself, I think, is a little bit more flat than maybe some of the other songs, but it's got some very needle-like guitar work. It's very interesting. But, yeah, solid song. Then we come to 3940, and this is only about a 50-second instrumental or so. It's very short. It's really more just a guitar doodle. And it's very different because it almost sounds medieval. It's got a very 16th century Greensleeves feel to it. It's very unlike everything else they've done here, and it's quite interesting, I'll say that. But then the side one closes with For the Future. And this thing is very anthemic. Not to the point where it's a heavy metal parody or anything. I mean, there's other artists that have definitely done that. But it's anthemic all the same. I mean, it's a big, we're gonna fight for the right to rock feel to it. And that can be either a very good thing or a very bad and ridiculous thing. But I think they pull it off very well here, and I think it definitely works in my opinion. The middle, in the middle we have the interlude, and actually a lot of these songs follow a very predictable pattern, but there is an interlude in the middle, and it sounds almost galloping. It almost sounds like Iron Maiden, like they're about to charge off into battle, and I like it. I mean, it's definitely my thing, and I do give it my endorsement. But in all fairness, if I had to pick a favorite from side one, it's definitely Don't Need Your Money. So we have that. Now let's move over to side number 2, and once again, I don't really have a lot of space to work with, but it's okay. And the very first song off of side 2 is going to be the title track, Rock Until You Drop. And it sounds a little different than what came before it. It fades in, and it's got a very thunderous, stomping intro to it, and it really sets the mood very well. But this thing is not very fast. It's more brooding. It's more doomy, but I still love it all the same. I mean, not every song has to sound exactly the same, and doom metal works very well, and I definitely respect this one. But you know, the chorus is pretty simplistic. It's basically, you gotta rock until you drop. But it rocks, no pun intended, all the same. Nobody's Hero is next, and I gotta say, I really think this one is the most disposable track on here. Yeah, it's kind of weak, and I really think it lacks direction, if that makes any sense at all. But I mean, still, it's very raw. It's very unproduced like everything else on here. But like I said, it lacks direction and it sounds kind of flat. And the chorus is really nothing to write home about. It's just him saying the name of the song, Nobody's Hero. And I probably did that incorrectly, but it's all right. But after that one, we come to the next kind of cluster of songs. We have Hellraiser and Action. I'll say this, on the Greatest Hits album that I own, those two songs are combined together in one track, so I'm going to think of them as one entity. Now, why were they combined together? Well, the only explanation that I can think of is that they sound similar, but Hellraiser, surprisingly enough, is a lot more upbeat than maybe some of the previous songs, and you wouldn't have thought that, since the song is entitled Hellraiser and everything, but, it works pretty well, and there is kind of a drum solo towards the end, more like a drum little interlude, I guess. It's right in the middle, but it segues very well into Action, which is actually a cover by a band called Sweet. Yes, that was their name. I don't know much about them, but from what I've gathered, they were a punk band back in the 70s. But I do know this song because it was also covered by Def Leppard. Not during what I would consider their heyday or anything, but it was covered by Def Leppard, so we have that at least. So when I first got into these guys, and I listened to that Greatest Hits album, I was like, wait, I know this song. That's Action. Def Leppard also covered this. I didn't know that this was a Raven song. Well, actually, it's not a Raven song because this is also a cover. Raven covered it as well, so yeah, but chorus, it's also pretty upbeat. It's very similar to Hellraiser in my opinion. That's why they go so well together. But the chorus, and that's why everybody wants a piece of the action. Something about satisfaction. I kind of forgot the lyrics, but it's all right. But great song, great duo. It works. Then we have Lambs to the Slaughter, which is kind of an underrated gem. I'll say that. It's got a very good riff opening up, a very, very good beat to it. And believe it or not, it sounds a lot like Steeler by Judas Priest. And that's what I noticed the first time I heard it. I was like, wow. And I love that song. I love Steeler by Judas Priest, so naturally I really love Lambs to the Slaughter. But yes, Steeler by Judas Priest actually does predate this. So I'm not sure if they were an influence. I would imagine they were, but either way, it's okay. But anyways, the chorus is pretty simplistic. Yeah, it's time to fight back. Yeah, it's time to attack. Again, that falsetto is still very, very, very apparent. But then finally, the last song, which is the album closer, track 11, is Tyrant of the Airways. And this one, again, it kind of breaks the formula a bit. As I said previously, a lot of these songs really, really follow a standard formula. Verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus. Well, this one is actually over 7 minutes. It is by far the longest song on here. And it kind of switches things up a bit because it's got a very, very slow beginning. I wouldn't call it doomy, I would call it sludgy, if that kind of makes sense. It kind of fades into itself, I guess you could say that. Maybe not, but again, I would definitely describe the opening as sludgy, but after that, things really start picking up, and we got a really, really good guitar intro, and then, we have verse, chorus, Tyrant of the Airways. But then after that, we have an interlude just like before. But this one is very dark and very, very murky. I wouldn't call it heavy or anything, but it's definitely very, very gloomy. And it's trying to set the atmosphere and kind of get you in the mood and everything. But then we have some killer guitar work after that when it comes out of that very dark and gloomy atmosphere. And again, the guitar in the middle, it sounds a lot like Kill 'Em All by Metallica. It sounds a lot like the guitar solos that they played around that time period. It's quite interesting. Again, you can definitely see who influenced who, and that's one reason why I find this very, very fascinating. But then again, we have another verse, chorus, and then everything crescendos and climaxes at the end, and we have this big, thunderous finale, and then the record is over, and that is the end of Rock Until You Drop by Raven. And to be honest, I think my favorite from side 2 is probably Lambs to the Slaughter. But it could be Tyrant of the Airways or Rock Until You Drop Another Day. But today I am going with Lambs to the Slaughter. So anyways, that was my review of Rock Until You Drop. And I really want to say thank you for joining me. Lesson, if you hear a band that you think you might like, get into them immediately. Go check out their work. Because the worst thing that could ever happen is you spend year after year depriving yourself of what could have been a very great band to listen to. Anyways, next week I think I'm going to continue to talk about birds, but until then, have a very pleasant evening.